All right, so there's a couple of different security considerations that you want to think about when you're doing forms authentication. Replay attacks are one of the most obvious. If an attacker can manage to steal a cookie from a legitimate logged on user, there's a couple of different ways we can do that. We can steal it off the user's hard disk, because I showed you they might be persistent cookies. Or if the guy's sitting right next to you in a cube next to you on the same subnet, it's very possible he could eavesdrop using a tool like Netmon and watch, cookies go across in HTTP headers. And so if I can watch that header go across the wire, which is very, very easy to do, then I can grab that cookie, put it on my own machine, and access the website. And think about what happens. The cookie itself is encrypted, but if I capture the whole cookie and put it on my machine and send it to the website, ASP.NET's not going to know it's been stolen. As far as ASP.NET knows, it's just the original user coming in. No IP addresses are stored in the cookie, so there's no checking as far as that goes. So cookie encryption doesn't prevent replay attacks. How do you fix this? Well, the best option is to run over SSL. If you run your whole site over SSL, and there's a nice option that you can set on the forms element under the authentication element in config. If you set that to true, it'll make sure that the cookie will only be sent over an SSL connection. And when you're going over SSL, the entire stream is encrypted. So it's impossible for somebody to just pull out a cookie out of that stream because he doesn't know the key. He doesn't know how to decrypt it. So running over SSL is a very good option. Some people have a problem with SSL. They can't run over SSL for various reasons. Then you basically are going to be open to this sort of attack. One thing that you can do is you can reduce the timeout. You can reduce the amount of time that the cookie is valid. This is going to make the user's experience a little harder because they're going to tend to have to log in more often. But you'll see that banks typically do this. They typically use a very relatively short timeout period. I use Wells Fargo. And if I go idle for more than like 15 minutes or so, I pretty much have to log back in. It may even be 10 minutes. It's a fairly short timeout. Now, the other type of attack that you have to think about is what's in the cookie. The user's name is what's in the cookie. And so what happens if you have a user who legitimately logs in and gets a cookie, but then reaches inside of that cookie and changes her name to be like administrator or somebody that has more privileges? Well, by default, you're protected from this. And this is one of the good things about forms authentication in ASP.NET. What it does is it takes the value of the cookie or the contents of the cookie and it hashes it. It hashes the contents of that, basically forming a secure checksum. But before it calculates the checksum, it actually puts a secret key onto the front of that. So it actually calculates the checksum of the cookie plus the key. That forms what's known as a message authentication code, or a MAC. And it adds that hash value onto the end of the cookie, and then it sends this part of the cookie, right? It sends the cookie along with that hash code. That becomes the whole cookie. Notice the key is not sent, right? So if an attacker sees this going across the wire, or if a legitimate user, tries to manipulate the contents of this, what's going to happen is that when ASP.NET gets the cookie back, it's going to take its copy of the key that it knows, the secret key on the server, and it's going to put that in front of the cookie value, hash the cookie, and compare that with the message authentication code that was sent. So a user can tamper with this cookie all she wants, but every time she changes the contents of the cookie, she's not going to be able to recalculate this hash because she doesn't know the secret key. And so ASP.NET's going to, in essence, ASP.NET's going to be able to detect tampering every time. So this is a good thing. And as long as you don't reduce the default protection setting that you get on your forms element, by default, it's set to encrypt and do this message authentication code, you're all set.